Medical marijuana is now legal in 30 states and Washington, D.C. But on the federal level, the government still classifies cannabis as a Schedule I drug, highly addictive with no medicinal uses. That's the same classification as heroin. And that creates obstacles for researchers studying the health benefits of a compound found in marijuana. The new documentary, Weed the People, follows the journey of families fighting to gain access to cannabis treatments for their terminally ill children. Here's a preview.
They found over 20 tumors in his chest.
They said your daughter will not live to see her second birthday.
When your kid's got cancer, the rule book goes out the window, really. I wouldn't feel right if I didn't explore everything that there was.
When we found out about Sophie's brain tumor, I had no idea this would be the gift from God to her.
Would you let a first or second grader or any child use medical marijuana?
It's the same as every other drug. There are chemical compounds in the plant that interact with the cells in our bodies and have certain reactions.
The different ways that cannabis and cannabinoids seem to suppress cancer is quite impressive.
It's life and death. As a mom myself, I would do it in a heartbeat knowing what I know.
The federal government is telling us there's not enough research on cannabis to deschedule it from Schedule I, and then they're saying you can't do research because it's Schedule I.
In 1937, the American Medical Association told Congress you should not ban this substance because there's things that we are already using this for that we don't have substitutes for.
He'd had to have Dilaudid to manage the pain, and that had created an opiate dependency, so they put him onto methadone.
Because as it originates from our pharmaceutical industry, it's accepted by society.
I started reading about the anti-tumor properties of cannabis oil. It's all about supporting the side effects and helping the chemo to do its job.
One of the main reasons I want it legal is so that we can start having standards and not have it be the Wild West.
We're in uncharted waters. We're lab rats.
There's enough research for me to know, one, it happens to be a very safe medication, and two, it works.
Oh my God, that's where the cyst used to be. It's working.
I just find it staggering to accept that with the billions of dollars that are spent on cancer research, that the medicine that we were relying on is made in somebody's kitchen.
Oh, it's gorgeous.
The whole drug policy reform issue is a human rights issue at its core.
Why, as a society, are we denying people the use of something that I have seen over and over and over again be helpful?
What kind of medicine are we giving her?
The good kind.
Well, earlier this week, I spoke with the film's executive producer, Ricky Lake, and director Abby Epstein. Here's our conversation. Ricky, how did you get involved in this topic in this documentary?
It was my husband, who's since passed away, Christian Evans. He struggled with a lot of issues, both physical, chronic pain, and some other stuff, like ADD and anxiety and stuff. So he was searching the web about cannabis and CBD way before Sanjay Gupta was talking about it on CNN. And at the same time that he was finding stuff about this plant that could help him, a little girl came into my life, a little girl through Dancing with the Stars and through social media. She was a fan of mine, and I moved her and her family into my home for 6 weeks and went on this journey to try to find integrative care for her disease. And I called Abby, and I said, you're not going to believe this. I have this little girl, this stranger, I've moved her in. We're going on a private jet up to Mendocino to meet a cannabis doctor. And she's like, wait, I think this is our next movie. Wow. And that's really how it started. And it's 6 years later, and following these children with cancer for 5.5 years, it's remarkable what we were able to discover about this plant.
But Abby, you're talking about children using pot. It's so controversial.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people don't really understand what that looks like. They're like, are they smoking joints? And just, these children are taking extracts. So it's really dosable medicine. So they're taking the plant and they're making it into an extract. It's not that different than any other medicine you would take. But one of the reasons that we did decide to focus the film on children is because it really removes that stigma. And then you don't have that argument of like, oh, is marijuana really medical? Or, those people just want to get high, or they're just saying it's medical. I mean, these are babies, literally babies in the film, going through chemo. And you see how much this medicine, in some cases, their parents are crediting it for saving their lives. It's pretty dramatic.
You also address the skepticism, though, that medicinal marijuana has. And a lot of people look at this and think, I don't know.
So I think there's just this, we've been programmed, we've been brainwashed to think that this plant doesn't have medicinal value as a Schedule I drug, but yet the government holds a patent on it. So, and in the case of, I think, GW Pharmaceuticals, there is now an FDA-approved, drug for epilepsy, Epidiolex. So it's this hypocrisy, So I think it's about really informing the public, to understand the history and how this was a medicine for thousands and thousands of years, and it only hasn't been a medicine for 80 years, It's like, wait a minute, what happened?
And Abby, you guys also, this wasn't just a focus in the United States, you traveled to Israel and other countries. What was it like when you left the United States? Were people more receptive to this?
Israel's a very liberal country when it comes to science, and thank God they've had these scientists who had discovered and isolated THC in the 60s and then discovered CBD and have been doing all this research and leading the world in it. So, when we were in a lab in Israel and you're seeing cannabis being put in a test tube with cancer cells, and the cancer cells are self-destructing through a
committing
process.
Suicide. They call it apoptosis.
Apoptosis. Yeah. So it's a process called apoptosis, and it's like cell suicide. And we're watching this in the lab. Your mind is just blown. And I think as documentary filmmakers, those are the stories we're looking for. The stories of why doesn't everybody know this? Why is this information not out there? So we really hope that this film is kind of a game changer for people who were either skeptical or just didn't understand what medical cannabis really looks like.
In the film, you actually see these families experiencing positive results. Do you think the government will rethink their take on medicinal marijuana?
It's about time, and the studies on epilepsy are dramatic because you see, black and white. This child was having 100 seizures a day, now has 2 seizures a day. So you see it. With cancer, it's harder to see because it's, on the inside. But I think our film really has an opportunity to kind of be the tipping point, for really having the public understand what this plant is about, what it can do.
The government is going to have to change their position on this at some point, and especially now that I think there's so much money coming into the cannabis industry and there's big business pushing this. And
I think it's working in these states, these recreational states. Colorado's having, it's a really been a good experiment, I think. California is it remains to be seen, but it's an exciting time. And for us, making this movie and starting it in 2012 and having it come out now, I think it's perfect timing.
Was there any pushback when people found out what you were working on? Was it hard to roll out a film like this?
Well, yeah, with the hospitals.
We'll see.
No, but when you were shooting,
filming was hard.
Yeah, because we'd get in the first shoot, and then they get wind it's about cannabis, and then they were blocked.
Right, and what was so sad about it is that a lot of times the oncologists or the doctors of these children were so blown away by what they were seeing, and they actually wanted to participate in the film. They wanted to speak to us, but they weren't allowed to because, again, the hospitals are nervous. They get federal funding. This is not, this is federally illegal. They're breaking federal law by having this, in their hospital. But some of the kids were actually able to use the medical cannabis in the hospital, which was amazing. And you see that in the film. And they can administer it right through their G-tube. And they felt that it was, helping way more than these terribly toxic drugs they put these kids on, oxycodone. And so that's another side of what we look at in the film is, America has this huge opiate crisis right now. Could this be a solution? We think yes.
You do believe
absolutely.
Ricky, what ultimately do you hope that people who watch this film will take away?
My whole sort of basis in all the movies that we make together are about informed choice. I'm really not about getting people to think how I think or do what I did. It's really about expanding people's knowledge of something and have them be able to make a judgment and a decision that's best for them and their bodies. It's going to help people. I think it's going to save lives.